This week on Checkpoint.
The first time we went there, it was a show.
One of the male nurses and the security took him, they stripped him, and they beaten him up until he wetted himself.
More revelations from mental health institutions in the Eastern Cape as the Health Ombudsman investigates.
If one looks at what's going on in the Eastern Cape, I suppose the biggest difference is that it's not one institution, it's the whole province.
This is Checkpoint, and I'm Ngepile Mabuse. Mental health in the Eastern Cape remains under the spotlight as Health Ombudsman Professor Malekapuru Makgoba investigates conditions at Tower Hospital in Fort Beaufort and Fort England in Grahamstown. This in the wake of shocking allegations of patient abuse and more than 70 deaths in several years. This report was compiled by Health E-News.
The prison-like seclusion rooms at Tower Hospital, where patients were allegedly housed for days on end against mental health regulations, were torn down in early June. In March, the sole psychiatrist at Tower had resigned after what he said was 2 years of trying to make a difference.
I got home and I sat down with my family and I said to them, I've just come out of a meeting where I've been told that I have no rights. We might live in a democracy, but I have no rights. I can't access the minutes of the meeting that I've just come out from.
Dr. Kiran Sakuri's decision to report conditions to the Health Ombudsman and to the Society of Psychiatrists set in motion a flurry of activity at Tower. The first was a so-called unannounced visit by now former Health MEC, Dr. Phumza Jantyi. A former employee who wants to remain anonymous was there at the time.
The MEC said it was a surprise visit. To me, it's absolutely not true. The reason being, the staff members a night before were doing up and down, busy like a busy bee, changing the mattresses, changing the bedding, putting the new microwaves, blankets, track suits for patients. The portfolio head, that is Mr. Dimaza, asked to the SG as to why, if we say this is a surprise visit, there are microwaves going up and down. The tractor is busy cutting the grass as if it's preparing for this thing. Now, there was no answer to that.
The CEO was asked by the press, was this a surprise visit? Her response was, yes, it was a surprise visit. We didn't even tell the day staff. So I think, okay, what didn't you tell the day staff? Because it means you were aware of something that was going to happen, but you didn't tell the day staff because you spent burning the midnight oil, cleaning out certain sections of the hospital.
The Eastern Cape Health Department says that's not true.
The visit happened on a Monday. Decision was taken at night. It would have been impossible for that hospital to try and clean overnight.
Community journalist Catherine Cleary says everyone knew the MEC was arriving.
Everyone in this township knows when the MEC comes or when Bishu comes because all the lights go on at Tower in the middle of the night, all the spotlights and everything go on. And they said, no, there was something going on there because all the lights were on until 1 o'clock in the morning. And to me, that spoke volumes.
Where the visitors went in the hospital was allegedly stage managed.
They visited specific sections of the institution. They didn't visit the entire institution. So they only visited the ward where the seclusion or the single cell was pictured.
Director of the Rhodes University-based Public Service Accountability Monitor, Jay Cruiser, says the Health Department's default response is damage control.
It reveals the crisis that we're in, and that What's alarming is that it takes a whistleblower to bring this to the fore.
Pictures like these appeared in the media to create the impression of a well-run facility.
The first time we went there, it was a show. And they took us from space to space of their choice.
At the end of April, Health E visited Tower Hospital with the DA shadow MEC for Health, Celeste Barker. She asked to see specific wards and they filmed with a hidden camera.
I don't think we did see them. Would you mind just showing us again so we can check and see we did actually see a lot? Okay, thank you.
These were bleak by comparison to what the MEC was shown.
The dreadful men's bathrooms. They are the worst I've ever seen. They were black, the ceiling was black, the walls were black. There were 2 showers that were dripping, so you could hear, it sounded like a torture chamber.
How do you work here with the smell?
No, we tried our best, man. There's nothing we can do.
Relatives of patients often complain about the stench.
To him, he was smelling tower, the clothes and whatever.
There was a hell of a strong smell of urine. I don't know if did it come from the men's ward or if it came from the side where the children were or if it came from both sides. But that smell was pretty strong in a big chunk of the building.
Staff say the sudden spotlight on Tower Hospital caused the former CEO to panic.
They are busy rewriting the notes because of her instructions. Busy rewriting even the minutes of the meetings.
If you tamper with any of the laws, there are processes that are used to subject you and get you out of the system if you are found guilty. Any person, if there's proof, definitely that person is playing with fire.
The public protector is empowered to investigate. So that office needs to explain what action it is going to take amidst these disclosures around this facility.
Let's hope that those allegations were presented to the team, and I trust the team that went there. But I doubt if anyone would really play with his or her own career like that.
To be able to do that.
In the first week of June, as Health Ombudsman Professor Malachapuru Makgoba arrived in East London for meetings about the mismanagement and mistreatment of psychiatric patients, 150 kilometres away in Fort Beaufort, Tower Hospital opened its doors to journalists. Everything looked spick and span with fresh linen on the beds.
More about conditions at other psychiatric institutions in the Eastern Cape after the break.
It's not one institution, it's the whole province.
What was exposed at Tower Hospital isn't unique to mental health care facilities across the Eastern Cape.
If one looks at what's going on in the Eastern Cape, I suppose the biggest difference is that it's not one institution, it's the whole province. This is not a new problem. We've had a similar crisis happening way back in 2012. We've had a similar crisis in 2014. We had a similar crisis in towards end of 2016, beginning of 2017.
Professor Zukiswa Zingela, who chairs the Eastern Cape branch of the South African Society of Psychiatrists, knows all about the multiple problems.
People get disillusioned, people get demotivated, people get tired. And, I must be quite honest, it's not nice to see that patients are not getting the care that they deserve because of the continued crisis.
Not only are patients not getting what they need, families complain they are being abused by those meant to protect and care for them. Grahamstown resident Maggie Jacob says growing up she knew there was something wrong with her brother Stephen.
He always wanted to be alone, he always locked himself up, and the things he was speaking was not okay, and also he always wanted to walk away from us and just walk away, not to stay with us at home.
So they took him to a local hospital where he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder.
They said it's a mental problem, that at times we'll have highs and lows.
Stephen was admitted to Fort England Psychiatric Hospital in Grahamstown in 2014. But that's where the real nightmare began, she says.
I didn't know about the fact that he's been assaulted. Didn't want to be at Ward C because he was being beaten up in 2014. So my mom also never wanted him to go back to Fort England because he has been beaten up previously.
That's not all Stephen had to face at Fort England, says Maggie.
So once he told me about the guy who wanted to sleep with him forcefully. But my brother felt very scared to tell them because of the previous problem. And I've gone to the ward manager and I told him, my brother, there's another problem. There's a guy who wants to sleep with him forcefully. And then the ward manager asked me, why do I tell him about that?
Since the initial beating, there have allegedly been many more, the most recent a few months ago.
One of the male nurses and the security took him. They stripped him. They took him in an isolated room and they beaten him up until he wetted himself.
She says Fort England management didn't seem to take the allegations seriously.
I've gone to the hospital and there was a doctor, the ward manager and also the social worker. The doctor also take the side of the people who assaulted my brother.
She wrote an official complaint to management.
They said there is no such thing. My brother said it was a lie. He'd never been beaten up. And then after they asked me, what do I want must happen to the guys who beat my brother up?
There's so many factors. It's a very scary position for Maggie to be in. It's a very scary position for her brother to be in and for her family.
Ek wil net dat hulle idala parino is dat hy by 'n ander plek gesit word. Want hy is baie ongelukkig waar hy is.
Her mom, Rena, has had sleepless nights about her son's safety.
Nou is die ma wat lekker voel dat jy as jy kan seer gekry het. Geen ma man. Jy kan nie lê nie. Daar's baie dae wat jy ook nie kan eet nie want jy dink eet my kind, slaap my kind.
Maggie says staff posing as police officers try to convince Rena to keep quiet about Stephen's alleged assault.
He was not a police officer. They was just tricking my brother. And thereafter they told him, he must not say he has been beaten up.
Ek voel ook nie gelukkig dat hy daar is. Want ek weet nie wat kan hulle nog aan hom doen.
Stephen was eventually released on the 1st of May.
They say no, he's not fit for leave yet. Now suddenly he's not good enough to come out for a weekend. What I'm thinking, they might have dropped his medication somewhere somehow so that it can take time much longer to get better.
The next day, Maggie and her family opened a case of assault at the Grahamstown police station. Fort England Hospital's acting CEO, Mbui Zonke, responded to us by email, saying police had been to the hospital and that the matter was being investigated. So Maggie's family live in hope, but hope is in short supply in a province hemorrhaging professional staff at state psychiatric facilities.
This institution functioned without a psychiatrist for decades. So basically what's happened is they've gone back to how it functioned prior to 2015. As far as I know, in terms of professional staff, we have lost 4 medical officers, 2 clinical psychologists now, the head of Department of Social Work, that's like 7 altogether, 2 occupational therapists, that's 9, and then counting myself makes 10 professional staff within a period of 24 months.
The situation is mirrored at Cecilia Makiwane Hospital in Mdantsane, near East London.
We lost a very experienced psychiatrist in East London who could not stay in the system anymore because of exactly these challenges.
Leaked photographs of the psychiatric wards at Cecilia Makiwane shows shocking similarities to Tower Hospital. Port Elizabeth faces a similar lack of psychiatrists at state institutions.
We lost 2 senior psychiatrists in the western region in Port Elizabeth. And that just leaves 1 psychiatrist in the state sector in Port Elizabeth. So it's a situation that's just teetering on, about to collapse.
It's political. It's not. With Tower, let's wait for the findings. I've not had an opportunity to look at the findings, so I don't know anything that's being said by that report. But equally, people move, especially in the health sector.
When we return,
if rehabilitation is your core business, then make it your core business.
From the stinking bathrooms to the dark and dismal recreation spaces, an air of neglect fills the wards of most Eastern Cape state psychiatric units. There's little in the way of stimulation. Knives are often confiscated from patients, and drugs and alcohol are allegedly rife.
There were patients smoking cigarettes, and I said to the CEO, how do they have access to lighters? And she said, no. It's a smoking time, and only the nurses have the lighters, and they light the cigarettes for the patients. If they were smoking was a cigarette is news to me, because it did not smell like a cigarette.
This family member was alarmed by her nephew's list of demands.
He wrote a letter to one of my daughters and said, bring me coke, tobacco, some meat, and some 2 bottles of Savannah. Why do you ask for Savannah now? No, we are drinking Savannah in the hospital.
These facilities are supposed to focus on rehabilitation, but there's none of that, say those in the know.
So the assumption that mental health disorders or problems cannot kill you has always worked against us when we're asking for resources. But people then forget about quality of life. People forget about functionality. People forget about the fact that as an individual who's mentally healthy, you should actually be able to be a functional member of society who contributes to the economy.
If rehabilitation is your core business, then make it your core business. It shouldn't be one specific stream. So, in fact, a huge amount of your budget, because you're called a rehabilitative facility, should be focused on rehabilitation. And actually, it's not.
I think, unfortunately, we are at a point where there has been such an under-servicing of meeting the acute needs that rehab is probably going to be the last thing that, the whole system is focused on.
The focus is not independent living. The focus is institutional care. And in a rehabilitative facility, recovery is so important. It's the cornerstone of moving a person from these confined space to an environment in which they are human.
Dr. Sukeri believes some CEOs prefer to keep their numbers up rather than to discharge people. It's linked to budget. Staff at Tower agree.
And if patients leave the institution, it means our numbers decrease. It means our bed utilization rate decreases. It means that our funding will start to decrease.
If the patients are being released to go home, then one, the institution might be closed.
That's nonsense, says the Eastern Cape Health Department.
No, it doesn't make sense. That is not, cannot be. It was not going to change anything.
For Dr. Sukeri, it's not the things we see, like the stocked cupboards and the laundry. It's what we don't see.
The whole asylum architecture from colonial times has just continued. Fort England Hospital was a previous garrison. Fort Beaufort was a previous garrison. So those two asylums originated in prisons and were isolated from the rest of the community. And if you look even up to now, that most mental institutions are built away from communities and societies and in isolated spaces.
And this is why, he says, he's chosen to speak out for the voiceless lost in these God-forsaken facilities.
If I had to tell you that you will never have a right to privacy, you will never have a right to dignity, I will take away your individuality. I will take away your sense of being a person. What would be your response? I mean, people out there need to understand that that's what was happening from when I arrived there.
It's come at huge personal price.
I'm already being victimized. I think the smear campaign has started a long time ago, from probably the 5th of March. You know, you have government officials who post on their social media websites that I lied, I'm a liar.
Dr. Sekeri says he would do it again in a heartbeat.
The decision was right, as painful as it was in terms of the personal loss, in the victimization, I mean, but it was the right decision, and I would never change it.
It's paid off. Currently, there are 3 investigations underway. A provincial task team report is awaiting release by the Health Minister, and the Health Ombudsman is compiling his. There's a new Health MEC in the Eastern Cape, and the Tower CEO has resigned. Kolelwa Jakachana, whose brother Sango died at Tower Hospital in May, is glad she spoke out.
That tells me that they are running away from something, but they just can't say anything while they are still employed by those institutions, including the Tower Hospital CEO or former CEO.
Even if you then change your MEC and you change your SG, even if you change your director, if there is a layer within the department which is not supporting provision of resources so that patients can have access to care, then that's not going to change. So the question that we are asking is, what is it exactly that's causing this lack of action?
The Provincial Health Department says it's not all negative. They are building new facilities like this one near Mthatha.
This one is called Libode Psychiatric Facility. It's a 30-bedded mental health unit. We've built it, as you can see, we spent 105 million rands in putting up the structure.
Families say authorities must remember that it takes more than just bricks and mortar to effect change.
I need for the Department of Health and for Tower Hospital to acknowledge their wrongdoing from their own side or their mistakes. So, and the sooner they acknowledge their mistakes, then the sooner they can make changes.
Treat our mentally ill brothers with respect, not to ill-treat them. They are also human, and they must stop being inhuman, the guys who's working at psychiatric hospitals. Because a person who's mentally ill is human just as they are.
It's time to lift the veil of silence.
There's this cloak around everything that happens in these isolated institutions. So we're not aware, and hopefully speaking out about the unknowns, speaking for the voiceless, speaking for the silent, allows families, most importantly, communities, colleagues, governments to know what is actually happening.
That's all from us this week. Please do give us your feedback. Our Twitter handle is @checkpoint_ENCA and our email address checkpoint@enca.com. Thanks for watching. I'm Nkepile Mabuse.